Live in the Metaphor Club, this is Lawrence Ross, and today we have a wonderful panel with Kemp and Selwyn Hinds. We're going to be talking this afternoon about a subject that we've been wanting to do for a while, called Black Man, White Hollywood, Life as a Writer. Thank you very much for coming to the club.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Glad to be here.
So, Kemp, you come from, in terms of Hollywood, you come from writing plays as a playwright.
Yes.
One of your famous plays is One Night in Miami.
Yeah.
And so, when you come from journalism, you come from The Source and a long list of other publications.
Sure.
Now, I intentionally don't start with your Hollywood credits.
Yeah.
Tell us, each one of you, tell us how you got to Hollywood, because it seems like for a lot of black male writers, it's kind of like a journey that takes different paths before you actually get there.
Yeah.
So let's start with Kemp first.
Well, actually, I was a journalist too.
Oh, okay.
Playwriting was my second career. I was in New York for years. I was a writer for Blaze magazine and Vibe.
Right.
Then I was a business writer for Forbes magazine for years.
Oh.
And I got a night journalism fellowship at University of Michigan. So I got to take a sabbatical year, and I was supposed to be studying global economics, but I'd always kind of dabbled in writing theater and screenplays. So instead I started taking classes.
Oh, what type of classes did you?
Screenwriting courses.
Okay.
So when I got out of there, I transferred out to LA for the first time, and decided to kind of start pursuing my hobby a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of like an organic thing where it was, I was still at Forbes when I first came out here. Then I signed on with an agency, kind of started doing like page one rewrite work on features. Hated it.
Wait.
Hated it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You said, okay, I'm still kind of putting these things together. You were at Forbes.
Yes.
Okay. You do classes for screenwriting.
Yeah.
And then you got an agent.
I wrote a script during my fellowship and sent it out here and got an agent.
Wow.
Because I had a literary agent at the time.
Right.
Because I was a journalist. And my literary agent was like, I know some Hollywood agents. I'll send it out to him. He sent it to APA, and they signed me up.
Oh, beautiful.
So I'm one of the lucky ones. I kind of got out here. They sent my stuff around. I did like the song and dance, 40 Generals.
Yeah.
Everyone loves your script. No one's going to produce it. Because that's how it works. You go in and they're like, oh man, this is like an original thing. It's this amazing voice. Then they pull out their 20-year-old black script and go, what's your take on this? And they hand it off to you. So you end up doing rewrite work.
Right.
And that was the stuff that for me was kind of soul crushing, because none of these films were getting produced.
So you were writing spec scripts.
They weren't specs. They were often scripts. I was a third or fourth writer.
On these rewrites and everything.
And it would go right back in the drawer.
Yeah, it is.
You know what I mean? It's one thing to get paid to write a screenplay. It's another thing to get the movie made.
Right. Exactly.
There's people who make a good living.
Great living.
Writing scripts that never get produced. Their homes are bought by it. But as a former journalist, that's like living off of kill fees.
Exactly.
So after about 2 years of that, I had like my Robert Townsend moment. I was like, fuck it, there's work at the post office. And I went back to journalism for almost a decade.
Right.
And I was writing theater as a hobby. And it just so happened after 10 years of writing theater, my plays started getting produced and Hollywood came back.
Yeah, because then
suddenly playwrights were in.
Yeah.
But this time I was almost 40 years old, and I told everyone, like, back off. I want nothing to do with it.
Because now you have control of this.
Yeah, I had the gift of like the sight of suddenly being middle-aged and not chasing after every check. So it's actually been a lot, this past 4 or 5 years has been a lot better for me, because I'm more mature. I know what types of projects are right for me. I'm more concerned about doing something that's in my real voice and doing something that's going to get produced than I am getting a check. Beautiful. So it's almost like the failures empowered me to have the career that I have now.
To determine how you're going to do this.
Absolutely.
Now, Selwyn, you iconic in terms of, in particular, for those of us who love The Source. You basically, I'm gonna blow your head up. The Source was never better before or after than when you were there. So when I think for most journalists, like I was a journalist, when we saw your name on a masthead, we knew it was quality. So how did you move from there to, and because you've done comics, how did you move from there to get to Hollywood?
It actually starts earlier.
Really?
Right. It's a superhero origin story.
It
starts way earlier.
Yeah.
And for me, it starts as a kid growing up in the Caribbean, right?
Okay.
Growing up in Guyana, to be specific, and growing up in the 70s. And because of that time and that place and that country, like I was able to embody the first commandment of a writer, which is thou shalt be a reader, right? Because it wasn't a lot of TV and all this kind of modern stuff. So I read all the time. And I read this diet of stuff that included like, Chris Claremont's First Run on X-Men, Stephen King, all this like classical British literature, because those are the kind of schools we went to. So from the jump, I had this real cross-pollination of material and sources and just stuff to ingest. So it really laid the foundation for who I would become, even though I didn't know it. Right? Like I grew up thinking I want to be a doctor. Right?
Oh, really?
Like I always knew to write.
Yeah.
But if you're from a West Indian family,
That's
you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer. That's it. Right? I always like English was always my favorite class, and that time in English when you're like, okay, now it's the short story month. I always like write the short stories, but I never imagined that as a career. I said the next foundational part for me is moving to Brooklyn, as a teenager. And I moved to Brooklyn in the golden age of hip hop, right? And also the crack era.
Right.
So it's again, a whole bunch of different kind of stimuli. But the other thing that was happening then that informs me to this day is we used to sit down on our block on 42nd Street and have the box on and be listening to Red Alert and Molly Mall, and reading Secret Wars.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it was sort of like, it was like way predating this whole kind of like black nerd geek thing. It was like all that stuff was together and kind of made sense, at least for my crew. Right. Maybe not for everybody. My actual professional journey starts, I take a year off in college because there's a ad in the Village Voice that says they wanted a writer of color for this fellowship, right? And I was a voice reader. As a New Yorker, I was reading Nelson George and Greg Tate, and I was like, oh, you can write about hip hop like this way, right? At length and with all this stuff. And I was writing in college. Poetry was probably my first love in terms of narrative. Wasn't doing much like short fiction, but poetry and like essay writing. Right. So I get this gig at the Village Voice. This is in '93, and then over that next year, like I become the kid of the Voice who writes about the Roots' first album, Illmatic, basically everything that dropped in that period.
Yeah,
and I was
all
like,
the icons.
Okay. All the icons. So Biggie's first album. I was like, okay, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. Right. I'm not going to medical school. Like,
how was that conversation?
I love it with my parents. It was yelling and screaming. Names or gods were summoned and fires were burnt. You know what I mean? But it was, we worked it out. Right. So here I was now, post school, early 20s at the Village Voice, and that was sort of my rapid indoctrination into writing at a quality, highest level. And I think for me, for the career that followed, the Source, like that's what made the difference, right? Like for the rest of my journalism career, I was always trying to replicate what I had at The Voice, right? Because I learned from Tate and from Joe Wood and Lisa Kennedy and Bob Christgau, who's like the dean of like music criticism in America. You know what I mean? So I go from The Voice to The Source, and all of a sudden, I'm the grown up. With the vision that you see. All of a sudden, like I'm like, wait, nobody here is older than me. You know what I'm saying? This feels like weird, right? And where are all my mentors and this? And people are looking at me like, I know what to do. And this is before I'm an editor. I'm just music editor. But being that age, you have this kind of immortality to you. So we just didn't know enough to be scared. So those years of The Source that you guys talk about were just, they were incredible. They're incredible. We could do this whole hour just on The Source. We won't. But
maybe that'll be the adaptation.
They were, they were where I learned to tell stories. Where I learned to tell stories about this culture and these people that are so important to us. It's where I learned that there was no difference between the Justice League and Wu-Tang Clan. Right. There was no difference between Lex Luthor and Puffy. Right. It was sort of like the idea of like character and myth and all. Never know that all that stuff was really. I was just building my muscles for what I'd be doing to today. And so my journey goes from The Source. I leave The Source. And I begin this kind of like cross media, like I'm skip hopping through different things. So after The Source, I started this internet company with Russell Simmons, 360 Hip Hop. That was fantastic. Basically hired all my favorite, writers.
Yeah.
And we were creating the ultimate hip hop web destination.
Right.
And the day that we launched, the market crashed, and that was it.
Dream.
So that was for a certain generation of hip hop journalists, like 360, so like the great untold never was, right? Because it was me and Sheena Lester and Chris X and Jeff Chang and John Caramanica, who's like the main New York Times critic now. Like just amazing, like murderers row of rising thinkers. One of my favorite teams ever. From there, I wrote my first 2 books. One was for Simon & Schuster. It was a story about how a kid from the Caribbean ends up in the middle of hip hop. Right. And then I wrote this book with Wynton Marsalis. And that takes me to television. My first TV at Viacom, and I was doing like non-scripted stuff.
So you were doing like awards?
A lot of new stuff, reality-based stuff.
And let me ask you a question, because one of the things is that particularly you're talking about that's around the early part of
mid-2000s.
Mid-2000s.
2005.
And at mid-2000, you said, okay, I'm still.
That was when I was stepping back.
You were stepping back. You were like, I still need to.
You already had your first Hollywood tape.
It made me appreciate journalism 10 times more.
And you need the benefits at that point in time.
Yeah.